The stars stretched cold and indifferent above the peaceful colony of New Horizon, a small outpost nestled on the quiet fringes of the Helios expanse. For decades, New Horizon had been a place where humans lived simply, growing food, mining minerals, and building homes far from the chaos of interstellar wars. Their isolationist ways made them invisible to most alien powers, an afterthought in the great chessboard of galactic politics. Commander Leora Vance stood on the observation deck, her eyes scanning the violet horizon. Her youngest son, Eli, had just left for school with his friends, laughing and chasing one another through the dusty streets. Life here was slow, predictable, safe. Too safe, maybe. The colony had always prided itself on neutrality, refusing to take sides in the escalating conflict between the various alien coalitions that tore through space like wildfire. Humans weren't fighters. They were survivors and builders. But peace, fragile as it was, shattered in the blink of an eye. It began with the shrill alarms, piercing through the calm afternoon like a scream. The attack came without warning, a swarm of sleek, black ships darkening the sky, firing plasma bolts that turned homes to ash and hearts to stone. Children's screams echoed through the valley as families scrambled for cover. Leora's heart stopped when she heard the news. A daycare center, filled with her son's classmates, was obliterated. Hundreds of children lost in moments, including Eli. The colony's communication grid buzzed with frantic messages. The attackers vanished as quickly as they had come, leaving behind smoldering ruins and broken lives. In the days that followed, the survivors gathered among the ruins, their faces ghostly in the pale light of the dying sun. Grief hung thick like a suffocating fog, and rage simmered beneath it, slow burning and merciless. Council meetings were held in the shattered town hall, voices raised in bitter debate. The leadership wanted to stay out of the wider conflict. Humans were not soldiers. Their weapons were meant for mining and protection, not war. But the loss was a wound too deep to ignore. Leora's voice, usually calm and measured, cracked as she spoke. We weren't in this fight. We made peace with our place in the stars. But they took our children. That changes everything. No one had answers. No one even knew who the attackers were. There were whispers that they belonged to the Akrith Dominion, a brutal coalition known for extinguishing entire worlds. But the Akrith had never bothered with humanity before. Why now? And why with such cruelty? Late at night, when the colony fell silent, Leora visited the small memorial under the stars. She knelt before the names etched into cold metal, her fingers trembling as she traced her son's name. The weight of loss was unbearable, yet beneath it, a fierce fire ignited, a fire that whispered promises of revenge, resilience, and rebirth. We won't be ghosts in the shadows anymore, she vowed silently. Not while their blood runs through us. New Horizon was no longer just a colony. It was a battleground waiting to be reclaimed. And humanity, long underestimated, was about to rise. The wreckage of New Horizon still smoldered under a bruised sky as the survivors began to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. But beneath the ashes of loss, something else was stirring, a quiet defiance, a whispered promise that this would not be the end. Commander Leora Vance paced the makeshift command center, her mind racing through the options. The Council's calls for restraint were fading. The colony's people were no longer willing to be pawns or bystanders. They wanted justice. They wanted action. We need to stop waiting for someone else to save us, Leora said, her voice low but fierce. We have the skills, the minds, and the will. We just need to gather them. Her first call was to one of New Horizon's few remaining veterans, Captain Jace Corvin, a grizzled pilot who had spent decades navigating the treacherous asteroid belts near the border worlds. Jace was a relic from a forgotten war, a man whose hands had once steered fighters through enemy fire and whose heart still burned with the warrior's fire. When Leora found him, Jace was cleaning the rusted hull of his old starfighter in a forgotten hangar. His sharp eyes lifted to meet hers, wary but curious. "War's not our way anymore," he said gruffly. "No," Leora replied, "but maybe it has to be." Jace didn't answer, but the set of his jaw said enough. Next, she sought out Dr. Miratalin, a scientist who had spent years tinkering with quantum fields and energy matrices, a mind that was brilliant but underestimated by the colony's pragmatic leaders. Myra's small lab was cluttered with strange devices, humming softly with untapped potential. "Do you remember what they said about us?" Leora asked, stepping inside. "They said we were weak, that we would fold," Myra answered, eyes gleaming with resolve. "Let's prove them wrong." With Jace's tactical experience and Myra's inventions, Leora's vision began to take shape, a force born from loss, forged in determination, and armed with human ingenuity. The human fleet was small, hastily refitted miners, transport vessels retrofitted as fighters, and ancient cruisers brought back from mothballs. But what humans lacked in numbers and firepower, they made up for with relentless creativity. Jace's plans involved hit-and-run strikes, exploiting the enemy's rigid tactics and underestimating the humans' unpredictability. Intelligence reports trickled in, pieced together by Myra's hacking skills and Leora's network of informants. The attackers weren't random marauders. They were part of the Akrith Dominion, a ruthless coalition that sought to crush humanity before it could grow too powerful. The Akrith feared human adaptability, their capacity to learn and change faster than any other species. Even worse, the Akritha's grip extended deeper into the Helios expanse than anyone had guessed. Humans were surrounded by enemies on all sides, many of whom viewed the colony as a liability or worse, an opportunity for conquest. But not everyone was hostile. Small factions of aliens, weary of Akrith oppression, quietly reached out to humans with offers of alliance and intelligence. These alliances were fragile and filled with distrust, but they offered a glimmer of hope. As humans prepared to strike back, whispers echoed through New Horizon streets. Are we fighters? Or are we just victims waiting for another blow? Leora knew the answer. They were survivors, but now they would be warriors. At night, as the colony's lights flickered uncertainly, Leora found herself standing again before the memorial. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of all who had fallen. "This is not just about revenge," she said. "It's about proving that humanity cannot be broken, that our spirit will rise, no matter the cost." And somewhere beyond the stars, the Akrith Dominion took note. A new enemy had awakened, one that would not go quietly into the void. The night sky above New Horizon had never seemed so alive, bright streaks of plasma slashing through the darkness, engines roaring, and the cold void echoing with the sounds of war. For years, humanity had avoided the conflict raging across the stars, but now they were no longer the hunted. They were hunters. Captain Jace Corbin's fingers danced over the controls of his battered starfighter, his eyes sharp behind the cracked visor. The ship shuddered as it weaved through the enemy formation, smaller in number, but faster and more unpredictable than the Akrith commanders had anticipated. Engaging at point 5, Jace radioed back to the fleet. "Target those frigates and watch for interceptors." Around him, other human pilots followed suit, turning what should have been a desperate skirmish into a surgical strike. They hit supply convoys, communication outposts, and mining stations that powered the Akrith war machine. Their tactics were unconventional. Ambushes in asteroid fields, daring boarding operations, and electronic warfare unlike anything their enemies had seen. Mira Talon watched the battle unfold from the command deck, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. The devices she had crafted, prototype energy disruptors and cloaking tech, were already proving invaluable. "Deploying the pulse disruptors," Mira announced. "That should fry their comms for at least 10 minutes. The enemy ships faltered, their coordination breaking down like a house of cards. Humans pressed their advantage, the first successful counterattack in years. But the victory came with a cost. One of the smallest human vessels, carrying a group of civilian refugees, was caught in the crossfire and destroyed. The loss struck the colony hard, reminding them that the fight for survival would demand sacrifice at every turn. In the quiet moments between battles, flashbacks haunted Leora. She remembered the world before, her son's laughter, the gentle hum of the colony's machines, the innocent dreams of children who never had the chance to grow up. But those memories only strengthened her resolve. Humans were fighters now, awakened by grief and necessity. "We never wanted this war," she told her closest advisors. "But now that it's come, we'll meet it with everything we have." As word spread throughout the Helios expanse, human ships began to be feared. The phrase "fire in the void" became a whispered warning among enemy fleets, an ominous sign that the underestimated humans were no longer to be ignored. Yet beneath the growing legend lay a brutal truth. The Akrith Dominion would not surrender easily. For every battle won, the humans learned that the enemy adapted quickly, sending reinforcements and heavier firepower. The war was only beginning, and as the stars bled fire, humanity's heart beat stronger than ever. The war had settled into a brutal rhythm, but humans knew they couldn't win by firepower alone. They needed answers. Leora stood silently in the dim light of the interrogation chamber aboard the captured enemy vessel. Across from her sat Commander Zalvek, a high-ranking officer of the Akrith Dominion, a creature with cold, calculating eyes and scarred, sinewy skin. He had been taken during a daring boarding operation led by Jace's squadron. For days, Zalvek refused to speak, his silence a challenge. But Myra's scientific prowess broke the barrier, employing a mix of neural probes and psychological insight. Finally, the alien began to talk. "We feared you," Zalvek said, voice rough and alien. "Not because you were strong, but because you changed too fast. Your kind adapts, in days, in hours, what took others centuries." Leora's heart raced as the commander revealed the real reason behind the assault on human colonies. The Akrith Dominion saw humanity as an existential threat, not just militarily, but biologically. The humans' rapid evolution, their unpredictable strategies, and their unbreakable will made them the wild card in a galaxy dominated by rigid hierarchies. "They would consume us all," Zalvek spat, his face twisted in hatred. "Your survival means our extinction." This revelation sent ripples through the human command. The war wasn't just a territorial conflict. It was a fight for the very right to exist. But there was more. In a forgotten data vault deep within the enemy cruiser, Mira discovered something that chilled them all, a weapon, unlike any technology humans had ever seen. A device capable of disrupting the genetic stability of entire species, designed to annihilate the adaptive potential that made humans dangerous. "The nullifier," Mira whispered, scrolling through encrypted schematics. "If this falls into the wrong hands, or worse, if they activate it, we could be wiped out entirely." Leora's mind raced. Holding the weapon meant leverage, but it also meant the enemy would stop at nothing to retrieve it. The council debated fiercely. Some argued for immediate destruction. Others warned that without understanding it, they could not hope to counter the threat. Amid the tension, fractures appeared within the human ranks. Some feared the growing war would consume them all. Others thirsted for vengeance, so fierce it risked becoming blind rage. Leora realized the greatest enemy might not be just the Akrith, but their own doubts and divisions. As she returned to the command deck, the stars outside seemed colder, darker. The war had reached the heart of the enemy, and the stakes had never been higher. One thing was certain. Humanity's survival depended not only on strength and strategy, but on unity and unyielding hope. The quiet days of New Horizon were gone forever. Human ships surged into enemy space like a tidal wave, unyielding, fierce, and relentless. The fragile fleet that had once scrambled to defend their homes was now the spearhead of a sweeping counteroffensive that sent shockwaves through the Akrith Dominion. Captain Jace Corvin led the charge, his fighter cutting through the void with deadly precision. The starfield around him erupted in bursts of plasma and flashing missiles. The chaos of battle, a savage symphony of destruction. "Hold formation." Jace barked through the comms. "Focus fire on the enemy flagship." Below the roar of war, Miratalon's lab had transformed into a command hub. Her experimental weapons hummed with lethal energy, a perfect fusion of human ingenuity and alien technology scavenged from the battlefield. "Deploying new plasma disruptors," Mira announced. "These should disable their shields long enough for boarding teams to breach." Ground forces stormed planetary strongholds, turning cities into battlegrounds. Among them was Leora, now a seasoned warrior as much as a leader, moving through war-torn streets where every corner hid danger and every face bore the scars of loss. Yet, in the maelstrom of battle, there was hope. A young soldier, barely out of training, risked everything to save a wounded comrade. An alien ally defied its own kind to stand with humanity. And in the darkest moments, the memory of the lost children, of Eli and countless others, burned like a beacon, driving the survivors forward. But war demanded a price. Casualties mounted, and every victory was shadowed by grief. The line between hatred and mercy blurred, and some feared humanity might lose itself to the fury that had ignited within. At the climax of the campaign, human forces breached the Akritha's central command station, setting the stage for a final confrontation. Leora stood before the shattered walls, her gaze steely. "This isn't just a battle for survival," she told her troops. "It's a fight for who we are, for our future." The enemy was desperate, their forces fracturing, but their resolve unbroken. The clash would decide not only the fate of New Horizon, but the very soul of humanity. In the furnace of war, steel met blood, and humanity, once dismissed as weak and backward, rose, fierce and unyielding. The final battle raged across the shattered remnants of the Akrith homeworld, a planet scarred by centuries of conquest, and now a crucible for humanity's survival. Leora stood atop the ridge overlooking the battlefield, the cold wind biting her skin but unable to chill the fire within. Around her, the battered human fleet and their alien allies prepared for the last assault on the Dominion's heart. "We lost so much," Leora whispered, her voice steady but heavy. "But every fallen child, every shattered home, has brought us here." In the darkened skies, human ships moved with unyielding purpose, cutting through enemy lines with precision born from hardship and hope. On the ground, soldiers fought with a fierce desperation, knowing this was the moment to end the nightmare. The nullifier, the terrible weapon designed to extinguish humanity's adaptive spark, was recovered from the enemy's vault, but rather than wield it as a weapon, Mira and the scientists dismantled it, ensuring it could never be used against anyone again. The enemy leadership, desperate and cornered, launched a final offensive, but humanity's spirit would not break. Jace led the fighter squadrons in a deadly dance of dogfights, shielding the ground forces as they advanced. In the midst of chaos, Leora faced the Dominion's supreme commander, a towering figure of cold menace who had orchestrated the initial attack on New Horizon. "You will fall," the commander hissed. "We rise," Leora replied, voice unwavering. Their confrontation was fierce and symbolic, a clash of wills that echoed humanity's struggle. When the commander finally fell, the Dominion's forces scattered, their grip shattered. The war was over, but victory was bittersweet. The cost was etched in every scarred face, every empty chair at the dinner table. The children lost would never return, but their memory had forged a new humanity, stronger, wiser, and united. Leora looked out at the stars once more, the same stars that had witnessed their darkest hour and now their brightest dawn. "We weren't just survivors," she said softly. "We are the light that burns in the void, and we will never be forgotten." New Horizon rebuilt, not as a broken colony, but as a beacon of hope and resilience. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, no longer hiding in shadows, but standing tall among the stars. Because when the fight came to their doorstep and their children were taken, humanity rose, stronger than ever,